You're watching memorable entertainment television. MeTV Tri-State.
Broke the story on local homestead tax credit fiasco. Expose the Evansville Redevelopment Commission excessive spending habits.
Your community watchdog. CityCountyObserver.com is your online community newspaper dedicated to the progress of Evansville and Vanderburgh County. We're a nonpartisan publication providing insight into political issues and events that shape our community. We are a watchdog for you, the citizen. Check us out online, city-countyobserver.com. That's city-countyobserver.com.
Tri-State Voices, an open discussion with area leaders on issues affecting communities throughout the Tri-State. Now, here's your host, Mike Woods.
Good morning. Welcome to Tri-State Voices. Tri-State Voices is jointly sponsored by the City County Observer, WTSN, and my office, Woods & Woods. Hi, I'm your host, Mike Woods. Every week, Tri-State Voices talks to one of our community leaders about issues that are important to all of us. Today, I'm honored to have Wendy McNamara. Wendy McNamara is the representative from District 76. She was first elected in 2010, re-elected by a large majority in 2012, and she's running for re-election again this November. She has a bachelor's degree in political science, 2 master's degrees, and she's currently working on her PhD. She's obviously very interested in education, and it shows in the work she's doing in the State House. She's a member of 4 different committees: the Courts and Criminal Code, the Government Regulatory Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Government Reduction Committee. Wendy, it's good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Why is somebody that is doing so much in education, you're with the Evansville-Vanderburgh School Corporation in charge of the early high school college program? I guess 2 things. How do you find time to be in the State House, and how does your work in the State House work hand in hand with what you're doing with the Evansville-Vanderburgh School Corporation?
Well, I decided to run for office in 2008, standing in line getting ready to vote, because I looked across my community and I wanted something more. I've been very fortunate to be a part of the EVSC going on 20 years now. And my education background and being a part of that complements the work that I do at the State House. This past legislative session, I sponsored or authored a bill on career and tech education. Actually 2 of them. One was the governor's bill on looking at our CTE programs across the state and trying to coordinate those high-wage, high-demand jobs so that Indiana can go into the forefront as far as career and tech ed is concerned and look at addressing the skills gap. And for me, I authored the career and tech ed diploma because, in my opinion, we will never address the skills gap unless we address the skills where they're deficient, and that's in high school. That's in that curriculum. It's looking at those skills that industry and business needs. A lot of that comes from my professional background at the early college, but it also comes from our business community here in Southwest Indiana. We have a group called Brain Power. It's made up of business and industry leaders, education leaders, and we have jobs available in Southern Indiana, but we're struggling to find workers with the needed skills. So as a result of conversations and a lot of meetings that they've had and meetings that I've been a part of, this past session I authored the legislation for the Career and Tech Ed diploma. And ultimately what's going to happen, we're going to review the entire diploma system in Indiana and try to better suit the needs of business, industry, and most importantly, kids. Making sure that as they progress through high school, they're doing what they enjoy. And the outcome in the end, hopefully, will be a win-win, not only for students, but for business, industry in Indiana.
So if somebody gets out of high school and they have a CT diploma, I mean, what all courses will they've had to have taken?
Well, that's what they're working on right now. Last year we developed what's called the Indiana Works Council, and out of that I thought that was the best place to do the study, gather the data and find out what these courses are that we need to have students enrolled in to produce the best students with the strongest skills to be able to enter our workforce. The jobs of today aren't the jobs they were 30 or 40 years ago. when we talk about advanced manufacturing, it's no longer just sitting there on the line and having parts go by. There's a lot of robotics, there's a lot of math, there's a lot of technology involved. And so the skill sets are distinctly different. So what this subcommittee is going to do is spend the next year gathering data and finding out what the perfect set of skills might be and the curriculum that will go with that.
You know, when I was getting out of high school, the Vietnam War was still going on, and you could get jobs in factories, and they were good jobs. I mean, jobs that you could take care of a family, they had health insurance, a pension, all the rest of it. Those days are gone.
The type of job is gone, but the opportunity is not.
Yeah, but I mean, the person walking in there untrained, that's
absolutely.
That's
you
gone.
have to, for most part, to find a good, well-paying job, you need to at least have a technical certification, associate's degree, or the 4-year bachelor's degree. The biggest and most important thing that I've found is changing the mindset of the culture to understand that those jobs are out there. We just have to view them from a different perspective.
Are we graduating too many people with 4-year degrees and not enough with the technical degrees?
I don't believe so. Again, it's a cultural mind shift of understanding what's available. For the last 20 years in education, the push has been towards a 4-year degree. So the parents are always saying to the child, you're going to college. You're going to go get that 4-year degree where their aptitude might be robotics. It might be the advanced manufacturing or logistics. They just aren't being pushed in that direction. I never wanted to value the opportunity for somebody to get a bachelor's or go to a 4-year institution, but you also need to think of the appropriateness of somebody receiving an associate's degree that you can ultimately make and get a good paying job with an associate's degree as you can with a bachelor's. Ivy Tech has some great statistics on students coming out of college with an associate's degree, the opportunity to find jobs and the salaries that they'll get. That's part of the whole data collection piece and looking at and trying to provide the best environment for the future of Indiana, and I think we're on the right track for that.
Sometimes it just, and it's maybe just what I've seen, but lately, last few years, I've seen so many people come out of college and have a really hard time finding a job, whereas some of the people with the technical degrees, they're getting hired right away. I mean, there's a demand. Maybe there's a lot of those jobs going unfulfilled.
That's absolutely the reason I chose to pursue the Career and Tech Ed diploma, to give opportunities to fill those jobs. If you look at a lot of surveys that are done, the Indiana Manufacturers Association does a survey every year of the manufacturers across the state of Indiana. And number one reason why a lot of the jobs go unfilled or people don't stay in the job can come down to soft skills, showing up to work on time and being able to, problem solve. But number two is just lacking the skill sets necessary to complete it. It's not like coming out, of high school and just being able to step into a job. There's a lot of complexities in today's modern manufacturing world that you just need to learn the skill set to be able to be a part of.
You've been involved in the preschool pilot program. Would you explain what that is?
It started out as a opportunity for the entire state, but we scoped it down to about 5 counties in which we're going to sponsor, the state of Indiana, when I say we, a preschool pilot in which students that come from low-income families will have the opportunity to enter preschool. We're fortunate here in the EVSC or Evansville area. The EVSC already has substantially made an impact in that area. They were chosen as one of the pilot programs to begin, and I believe they'll begin in January with about 400 slots available to low-income students across the state to hopefully give them an opportunity that they might not otherwise have.
Is that similar to the Head Start program?
Yes and no. Head Start is a federally run program. The whole idea of the pilot is integration not only of just placing a child in an educational facility, but it's a full community program, getting parents involved, talking about how the family works together to promote the education of the child. And we've been successful at being able to do that. If you look in the EVSC, we are data-driven. School Corporation received a data award for 2014. And so I believe it's in a great place, and the state of Indiana can look to the EVSC as one of its leaders in pre-school education.
How's the voucher program working?
As far as the latest statistics, I'm not certain. It seems to be working across the state. Parents have the option of choosing where to send their child, and but as far as latest statistics, I'm not on top of those.
Well, the reason I was asking, I know it's growing, and I haven't seen the latest statistics either, but I was wondering, as the program, apparently it is going to grow, and is that going to be taking money out of the general education fund, or is the voucher program going to be just paid from the general state fund?
The idea of the voucher program is where the money follows the child. If the child, and it's a percentage, it's 90% of the total funding that would normally go to students, will follow the child to their desired location.
So will that then, if the voucher program continues to grow, will that actually reduce the amount of money to the public school system?
Yes, but the child can choose to go to the public school system as well. So, you know, that's not something that I supported going through the legislature, primarily because of concerns over the filling of a classroom and that sort of thing. So, but the mindset is the money follows the child.
Okay. Yeah, I just wonder, as that thing, and of course, I'm not going to figure out today, but as that program continues to grow, if it does grow, it's going to be interesting to see the impact it has on the public school system, and whether or not the public school system in certain districts are left with children that the private schools won't take, either because of behavior problems or whatever.
You know, locally, I think initially we noticed an impact, but I believe some of those students who had left came back. I do know that Mount Vernon was very happy to show an increase in students and not lose some, but that could be due to people moving into the community as well as people returning from vouchers. So it'll be something that I'm sure people will continue to keep an eye on, and something that some folks will continue to advocate for. But I think primarily at the crux of vouchers is the idea of providing choice and opportunity to folks that they might not have. We're a little bit different here in our community, especially in southwestern Indiana. We already provide a lot of opportunities. You know, my program is the best example of that. Students can choose to come and get an associate's degree, or 60 hours towards their bachelor's while they're still in high school. There aren't very many areas like that in the state, and the EVSC and our corporation provides all sorts of opportunities for kids today. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've been doing a lot of work on the tactical medical training issue. Explain to us what that is.
In 2012, local Evansville police officers contacted me about a concern of being able to perform emergency medical care in a dangerous environment, in a tactical medical situation. We were fortunate enough to get that legislation passed, and this last session, when it ended, I was able to go to Houston, Texas and observe some of that training. What I realized is our first responders in Indiana are trained well, but they're not all on the same page. So my goal is to bring together people from law enforcement, Department of Homeland Security, EMS, fire, all of our first responders to have this conversation about putting us on the same page, and hopefully provide the opportunity to have all of our first responders trained in a way so that they can respond without question in the most dangerous environments that we might find ourselves in.
And are all the first responders pretty receptive to that? And the reason I ask is because generally the sheriff's department and the city police and the fire department and all the rest of it, they're kind of turf-oriented type of people.
Yeah, I didn't know that until I ran for office, but to be honest with you, I think anytime when you're talking about protecting the community and taking care of individuals, those types of things can be set to the side, and we're talking about first responders. People are responding to the most dire of conditions, and it's my vision to have us be the #1 state to look to in the United States as far as being able to prepare and take care of our citizens. And I've met once with all the individual groups that I mentioned, and they're excited about getting on the same page, and the conversations will continue, and I'm excited to be able to hopefully provide that opportunity to them.
Okay. Now, you've done quite a bit of work about the juvenile justice dual sentencing project. Explain to me what's going on with that.
In 2010, I believe, we had a young individual at 12 years old who admitted to committing murder. The problem was he was physically very small and immature. And the Department of Corrections, sorry, let me back up for just a second. That's an automatic sentence to adult court. So he was sentenced as an adult. And once you're sentenced as an adult, the Department of Corrections didn't have a place to put him. They would have had to place him in an adult prison. And so they chose to break the law and place him in the appropriate facility. So they asked me, the Department of Corrections asked me to file some legislation so that when an individual is remanded to adult court and judges don't have any options, this dual sentencing gives them those options. You can look at the individual, determine whether or not this individual would be better suited by being in a juvenile facility for the remainder of their sentence, or if it would be more appropriate to place them in adult prison. But they didn't have that option prior to last year. And so this gives judges the option and the opportunity to appropriately place individuals in the proper environment for what their maturity level is and the crime that they've committed.
When I was a prosecutor years ago, certain crimes didn't even belong in the juvenile justice system. I mean, you had to charge them as an adult. You didn't have any choice. I don't care if they were old enough to be charged with a crime and murder, they had to be charged as an adult.
Correct, and this solves that automatic movement to the adult court because of that situation. You didn't have a place to put the juvenile, and now you do.
In 2015, you're wanting to work on a mental health bill, which will end what they call mental health justice by geography, I guess. What do you mean by justice by geography?
Justice by geography isn't my term. It's a term I've borrowed from the Department of Corrections. But basically what it comes down to is in Indiana, we are seriously lacking beds for juveniles who've committed crimes because of their mental illness or mental health issue. So if they commit a crime, that's an advent of their mental illness, and there are no mental health beds available, that individual will automatically find themselves in the Department of Corrections. They won't find themselves receiving the same type of care that somebody else might. I believe, and I've confirmed this a couple times, for boys, there are 18 beds in the state, and for girls, there's 12. So if we have more than 18 individuals in the state of Indiana who have committed a crime due to their mental health issue, those are going to automatically go into the Department of Corrections. And we want to stop this justice by geography, or at least make a big dent in it, and provide services to juveniles that otherwise might not receive them.
Do you think there's been enough in the juvenile justice system, and really I guess for that matter the adult justice system, to deal with people who are committing crimes because they're maybe not dangerous but mentally ill, as opposed to the people who they're not mentally ill, I mean they're just a criminal, there's no cure for them?
I think any justice system, not just in Indiana but across the nation, deals with or struggles with mental illness. All you have to do is look across some of the concerns that we run into here locally, and there could be a lot more, but the ability to hone in and take care of those things sometimes are limited by the justice system itself. And that's really what I hope to do with this juvenile mental health bill, is to really address and focus on that particular issue so that we can focus on taking care of some juveniles prior to the fact, so that when they become adults we aren't dealing with them again.
One of the most difficult issues in juvenile delinquencies is you have a child and they've committed a crime. But the real problem is their home life. They're really a CHIN's case, a child in need of services. And separating out where the crime of the juvenile starts versus where the problem with the home life starts, it's about impossible. And then even if you convict them of the crime, if you put them right back in that home, you've not accomplished anything.
Correct, and that's a big part of it. And conversations are taking place now between myself and the Department of Child Services and the Department of Corrections. When you have a CHINS or a child in need of services, that particular individual could also find themselves as a delinquent. So you have a juvenile who might find themselves in need of services while at the same time find themselves in the Department of Corrections. So that juvenile will have a probation officer and a case manager. So going back to the theme of putting people on the same page, it would be nice that the probation officer and the case manager can have a discussion, or at least put it down to one person to take care of this individual. Because if you look at the home life, in a lot of cases, it might be better for them, and I hate to say that, but it might be better for them to find themselves in the system than go home to a circumstance that might not benefit them.
Yeah, sometimes we would charge somebody with a crime where normally we wouldn't if they were a juvenile, just to get our kind of hands around them and the family, so they would have some kind of protection. Whereas if a person being from a really good home, you might just put them on an informal program and send them home and let the parents take care of it. But if they got a terrible home life, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and that's a goal of trying to provide more wraparound services for the juveniles, those that find themselves in the juvenile system, as well as those that find themselves as a CHIN. Our goal really is to really try to take care of the whole child, because if you don't do it now, you're going to end up doing it later, and hopefully not through the justice system, but more often than not, that's where it's going to wind up.
Yeah, if you look at the vast majority of people that are in adult prisons, they had records as juveniles. I mean, it's just one follows the other.
And hopefully we'll start to take a bite out of that one step at a time. Okay.
What's going on with meth? It seems like that's kind of a never-ending battle, and that unfortunately it seems to me we're losing. You're looking at some more legislation.
In the last session, I was able to author some legislation that would create a database through the Indiana State Police that if a home had meth dumped or manufactured in it, it would be put on a state police database, so that you would have knowledge whether or not that had happened or taken place, as well as placed on the realtor's disclosure statement. So if you go to purchase the home, you would have knowledge that, much like radon, that meth had been dumped. And a lot of people don't understand what meth actually does to the walls. It's absorbed into everything, and it gets into your drywall. A lot of times the building or the home has to be taken down to the studs and cleaned, and it's very expensive. Some of the cheapest is $12,000 per home, going up all the way to $40,000, and a lot of times the home might not even be worth that in value. So it's a health problem, it's an economic problem, and you know, it's an issue that for me, since I have been in the legislature, I've been trying to address. A lot of people would say, let's make pseudoephedrine a prescription, and I'm an advocate for that, but I'm also a realist. I have been on a piece of legislation since day one asking for pseudoephedrine to be a prescribed substance, but in recognizing a lot of the arguments for and against doing that, I'm trying to work out a compromise for the 2015 session, and that would be to have a month or two available, just like it is today through the tracking system, and then after that go to a doctor's care and get a prescription that way. It's still in the beginning stages, but it's a compromise that I think we can live with. You know, the message of meth often comes out, let's make pseudoephedrine prescription, but I want to change that message. I want people to think about the health costs, the death of children, the death of innocent individuals, of people who you know, are innocent victims in this whole thing. And I think that gets lost in the message in a lot of ways. There are a lot of victims in the wake of meth, and it's not just you know, talking about one little piece of medicine and taking care of it. It's a much larger, much more complex and pervasive problem. And I frankly don't want to lose another child, another house, another car, another human being to the scourge that's hit Indiana, and specifically to our region and our area. So I'm willing to do what I need to do and do what's necessary to fight this. And I believe, you know, if we could do this, you could even do a pilot for a couple years, see if it's effective. But like I've always said, those folks that use meth, they don't care about us. They're going to do it. They're going to leave innocent victims in their wake. And so I'm willing to do what I can to stop that from happening.
Yeah. I think last year the Indiana budget, if I remember the numbers right, we had a budget surplus of about $106 million on about a $27 billion budget. So that would be, if my math's right, somewhere of 1/4 of 1%. So it's almost exactly balanced. What's going to happen next year or the year after?
You know, in the 2012 legislative session, it was built upon a structurally balanced budget, making sure that we can live within our means, be efficient as far as government's concerned, and be able to still provide the basic necessities for folks. One thing is that we spent more on education than we ever have in the history of Indiana. We've dedicated dollars towards paying down the debt that Indiana found itself in from prior years. If you go back prior to 2010, the amount of debt, just the balance of that was pretty significant. So by the 2012 budget, we're able to start paying down some of that debt, start increasing budgets in other areas, and be able to spend a lot of money on infrastructure. You know, this year we've been able to dedicate $400 million to roads and continue to build projects across the state of Indiana. So it's very encouraging. I would expect a lot of the same things to continue as you look forward to the 2015 budget.
Okay. You'd mentioned $400 million toward roads, and I saw the other day that the mayor had made a proposal about the bridge across the Ohio, about an $800 million. The federal government's wanting to spend about $1.4 billion. Realistically, Kentucky doesn't have the money, Indiana doesn't have the money. Can that bridge possibly be built unless the federal government's going to come in?
I believe it'll have to be a combination of everybody's efforts.
Because that's way out of the state's limits.
Mm-hmm. It's a necessity. It's become a priority for the state of Indiana, so I can imagine us pushing to be a part of it. I've been a part of the I-69 discussion. I've been down to Kentucky a few times to have meetings there as well as here. And the bridge is a very important part of connecting I-69. And a lot of people, I think, talk about, you know, finishing the road up to Indianapolis, but a lot of people I don't think perceive it as having Indianapolis come down here. Once that connection is made between Indy and Evansville, it isn't necessarily moving us to Indy, it's moving Indy to us. And I think having the announcement that we're going to have guaranteed funds to finish I-69 to Indianapolis, I think we'll find a way to get the bridge built. Just not certain what direction that'll head at this particular moment.
Wendy, we're glad you're here. It surprised me, we're already out of time. You won your first election by, I think, 8 votes. The next time you got 56%. What would you like the voters to think about the next time they walk in the voting booth?
For me, being in office is a privilege and an honor, and it's also a great responsibility. For me, it's never been about politics or party. It's always been about the people. And that's the way that I've conducted myself since the day I've been there, is trying to look out for the best interests of Southern Indiana and champion what we have here.
I've enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much for being with us, Wendy, and we'll see everybody next week.
This year in the Tri-State, 1 out of 8 people will be in an accident.
Would you know what to do?
Call Woods & Woods. They'll get you help.
When you call Woods & Woods, you are not a statistic. You are our client, and we will fight to get the money you deserve.
And that's what Mike did. He really fought hard for me. They just really cared.
If you've been injured, call 1-800-544-2108.
Let Woods & Woods work for you. You don't owe us a dime unless we win your case.
You're watching memorable entertainment television. Me TV Tri-State.